Hello. As I tumbled through late-night delusion and melancholy, pondering my numerous delight of orbs, I thought to myself, maybe the majority of viewership doesn't appreciate my inane poems, so no poem today. But here's a subscribe button instead. Also a flower. Okay, video time. This fella named Beryl is hounded by his dad for not finding a mate and laying his eggs, but a dojo is no place for romance, and he is perfectly content with taking on new apprentices and honing his craft instead. Barry finds himself doubly oppressed at the dinner table, but Ossan believes in her son's prowess as a bachelor and figures he'll achieve wife soon enough. Speaking of which, an old alumni visits. It's Allucia Citrus, who moved up in the world to command the Royal Order of Knights, and came to recommend Beryl become a special instructor for the order. She says recommend, but here's an official document signed by the monarchy that essentially forces him into accepting immediately. Though Ossan is pleased by this and suggests that Beryl get a wife while he works in the capital, maybe even seduce the babe next to him. Beryl deflects, considering the staggering age gap between them. Alluvial doesn't mind though. On the ride to the city, Barry notices that his student is still using her graduation sword and figures she's still fixated on the idea that her master is superior. Beryl sees himself as just an average guy, so comparing his skill to the Royal Knight Commander doesn't feel right to him. Allucia responds to his hesitation by explaining that the backwater swordsman is legendary at this point. He's trained so many incredible warriors, knights, and adventurers that his infamy has more than earned the position she prepared. Here is Baltrain, the capital. Beryl hasn't seen the city sights for a while, reflects on how scintillatingly oppressive the lights are. Then the next day, he's introduced to the plebs. Miss Citrus holds no bars, and verbally fillets her master in front of the knightly order, which makes this guy particularly upset. Later, Beryl is told that he only needs to instruct the knights 3 or 4 times a month, and another backwater alumni arrives, Karuni, who's also become a fine knight. Seeing his old students makes Beryl a little less distressed, which is nice. Back home, he's ambushed by yet another alumni, Randrid. Gramps had craftily pulled a few strings to replace Beryl with someone else, in the hopes that he'd settle down in Baltrain. Randrid seems to be experiencing a similar situation. He had a child, and could no longer bring himself to continue being a platinum rank adventurer due to the risk of total annihilation, so figured he'd retire in the village and become an instructor. Gramps is chuffed. Later, Allucia is caught up on the drama, solicited to help find a crash pad for Beryl, then upon suggesting that he stay at her house, is promptly rejected. Suddenly, Lysandra, a fiery black rank adventurer, insults Allergy from behind. Benny has no wish to be whisked into trouble, and enters stealth while the two cats fight. Eventually, she pulls back the curtain on Beryl and discovers that it's the man who saved her from death and taught her to wield a blade. After a touching reunion, Allucia is heckled for being inferior, then spills the deets on Beryl's situation. This fuels the flame of competition between rivals, and they hook Homeboy up with some juicy lodge. The next day, the rustled Jimmy from Introductions explodes a fool's sword, then gets aggressive with Bandai after Alec turns him loose on the chumps. Henblitz Drought, the vice commander of the order, means no disrespect, but wants to test Beryl's skills himself. As they prepare to fight, mutters of skepticism fill the air. Beryl agrees with them mostly, as Hines spells out the murmurs in a clearer tone. Either way, Barry can't let Allucia lose face after doing so much for him, so he figures he should give it his best, and they begin. Henblitz channels a considerable amount of power into each strike, but lacks the technical nuance to kinetically utilize it, so Beryl harnesses that against him, landing a decisive pommel strike. Barry feels shame at accidentally bonking Henbler and readjusts his stance. Of course, Henblitz also didn't like that he was bonked, so turns up the power with his ultimate spin move. Unfortunately for the knight, Beryl had won the moment he discovered Henblitz's shortcoming and easily outmaneuvers him. After the bout, all doubts are quelled, and they visit the pub to toast to Master Beryl's arrival. Henblitz is reasonably embarrassed by how rude he was to Beryl, but it's all good. They discuss the details of the fight into the evening, while Randrid tells the geezer that in all his years traveling the world, never had he met such a swordsman as Master Beryl. It's been a long time coming for the backwater swordsman to have his well-earned quinceañera. Beryl gives some reasonable advice about managing distance to the scrubs, who seem as though they are about to establish a barrel-based religion. He thanks his fight with Heinrich for their zeal, then Karuni invites him to explore the city of Baltrain. Meanwhile, Allucia reflects on how the constant meetings afforded by being commander often only waste time if one wants to to master the blade, and has a flashback to her first meeting with Benadryl. He was kind, careful, considerate, and trained his students diligently. Aladui was mostly happy about being praised, but after visiting another dojo, came to realize that Beryl is the only person in this world who's built like that. They crushed without contest whatsoever. Allucia was so startled by her opponent's complete lack of skill that she asks whether they're actually cracked. They are, but Beryl is too humble, stubborn, and experienced to admit it. So instead tells Albert that rather than focusing on the strength of a dojo's style, learning the technique would be better suited to her individual growth. Allucia suddenly realizes that she lost something important and rushes back alone to get it. Probably an ill-advised move, and the degenerates, still raw from their beating earlier, spring their trap. Beryl intervenes though, a bit disappointed in the hooligans, but still understanding. The rival sensei arrives to break things up and scold his idiots, thoroughly apologizing for their actions. Later, Beryl is glad he acted on a tinge of worry and makes Allucia feel better about the whole surprise assault situation. She cries, but Beryl doesn't understand that she was just so full of emotion that she couldn't hold back the tears, and neurotically offers up food in response. Probably about the half-life of iodine later, Allucia bests Beryl and instantly graduates backwater school. She understands that she can't hold a candle to Beryl's legendary prowess, and at first rejects her degree, but as Alopecia beat him in a sword contest, there really isn't anything else he can teach her. After graduating, Allucia's first thought was to prove the worth of her master by committing great deeds, so became the commander of the Royal Knights. After spending 10 years climbing to that position, it was reassuring to see that Master Beryl's skills only became sharper. Anyway, she goes to check on him, but finds that Barry has already left with Kiruni. Illyria is jealous, but the exploration continues by bumping into yet another alumni who Beryl doesn't immediately recognize. It's Ficelle, who trained alongside Crouton for a couple of years in the dojo. Now she is the shining star of the Mage Corps. Bello is confused, but they go touch some magic items to demonstrate. Ficelle really is a wizard. Beryl is sad that she deviated from the blade, but no matter. Suddenly, a filthy purse snatcher, Fishy takes the opportunity to show that she hasn't actually abandoned the path of the sword with her crazy mage blade style. This is reassuring for Beryl, but he was already elated to begin with. The next day, an old fart goes for an early morning stroll while becoming absorbed in his thoughts. At the last few intersections, there had been a sassy child pestering him from behind. It's Lucy Diamond, commander of the Magic Corps. After some convincing, she invites him to walk with her, where they discuss Fisa-chan and her excitement to see him the other day. It would seem that Beryl was lured into an ominously arena-like location. Lucy begins to monologue about having spent every second of every day studying magic. Beryl agrees with the grind set, but feels uneasy after she explodes and states her wish to test prototype magic against a strong opponent. Loopy seems utterly dead set on doing battle, even though Beryl firmly proclaims that he's just a teenage dirtbag baby, and she conjures an intense conflagration a moment later. Beryl has always been fairly dexterous though, so can at least deflect and dodge the onslaught of spells while strategizing. A caster's weakness would be distance, so he goes ahead and closes it. However, Lucy is the real deal and knows how to counter that kind of business. Beryl is on the retreat at this point, having never fought a wizard before. He is heckled, and after utilizing a steamy smokescreen, is repelled a second time. Lucy ominously states that she's gonna flip her shit and convalesces the air around her into a portentous spiral. Beryl becomes nervous. Thankfully, Lucy stops, apparently satisfied with the result, and they discuss the battle. Despite her one-sided onslaught, the commander of the Mage Corps compliments Beryl on being so resilient, invites him to visit the Institute sometime to make up for the ambush, then eagerly states that she'd love to test new spells on him again. Later, Ficelle visits the Knights to drop off some potions and apologize to Boreal for Lucy's destructively eccentric behavior. She's kind of insane and probably old enough to be disqualified from playing most board games, but she generally means well. Suddenly, Allucia arrives, thanks Fish, then begins discussion of preparing new adventurers for dungeon expeditions with Lysandra at the behest of her guild master. Beryl has a flashback of his youth getting beat to a pulp and running home after attempting one such dungeon. He's not sure how much he could help, but Lysandra and Allucia team up despite their boiling hatred of each other and insist on the benefits. There isn't a clear downside, so Beryl agrees, and he and Lysandra visit the guildmaster. Lucy is there, keen on hanging out with her new favorite boy, and this is Nidus, head of the Liberis Adventurers Guild. He immediately thanks Beryl for accepting, confident in the recommendation by the twin dragon swords of Lysandra and the wise old Lali Baba, Looney. Carol tries to resist taking the job, but is completely ignored. Thankfully, there is a doubter in their midst, in the form of a pompous pool boy named Megan, who questions whether someone that has never been an adventurer could even help in a dungeon, let alone teach the infants how to Dougie like the best of them. Lizard is furious. Lucy is coy. The guildmaster is curious about what Megan is getting at, to which he suggests that Beryl have a mock battle with Lysandra to prove his competence, and Beryl has no other option but to agree. The usual murmuring is followed by Lander's outburst of excitement, then accompanied by a flashback. It's a small Lysandra Surena who experiences a terribly traumatic monster attack, falls into a chasm, then is rescued by Beryl. While he nursed her back to health and took care of her, she expressed little interest in anything until seeing Bossman swinging that thing around. Ever since, she's been enamored by the blade, learning diligently from dawn till dusk, and eventually becoming a student of the backwater dojo. Unfortunately, the good times couldn't last forever, and Lysandra was adopted, but she never neglected the valuable lessons her master taught. To utilize those teachings, she became an adventurer of justice who's never known the taste of defeat. It's been 20 years since then, and Lysandra is eager to show Beryl everything she's learned since. They initiate the dojo's customary bow and begin. Sure enough, those 20 years weren't spent in languor, as Surena goes nuts, ecstatic that Beryl is still utterly unstoppable. Beryl initiates his usual analysis, observing that Surena has incredible speed, stamina, and power, but one weakness. In a micro-pico nanosecond, her left hand is slightly misaligned compared to the right, which allows Beryl to disarm her from the sloppy strike, instantly prevent a follow-up, and bring Lysandra down. The crowd goes wild, and they discuss what just happened. The black rank adventurer hadn't totally mastered using her lefty, I guess. Still, no one else would have noticed that probably, so Megan apologizes for his insolence, and charge of the new recruits is given to Beryl. These are Porta Potty, Needy, and Sauerkraut. They're nervous, but it'll be totally fine, and nothing about this could go horribly wrong whatsoever. Shortly after entering, Sauerkraut's watch finds that there are several goblins, much to Beryl's surprise. After the delve is done, he's relieved that the newbies handled it so well, but Lysandra is worried about something. There were too few goobers, indicating the presence of a large predator, and Porta Potty's dead. That can't be good. It's a special target, the Xenoid Gribbler. Beryl is exasperated by his dumb luck, and figures he'll help Pasta, reaching out a hand for a healing potion, but is inconveniently tagged in instead. Not ideal, but how different can fencing be from fighting an incredibly huge beast? It's only been a few seconds here, but things are going alright so far, other than the resilience of the Xeno's stout hide. Bert receives an update on the situation with his peepers, and rules that buying time is the best option currently. The Zengi Grobus is much too strong to defend against, too sturdy to reliably strike back at, incapable of shooting flames from its bird face. All that being said, Beryl manages to cut through its whip-like tail after redirecting its kinetic energy well, which unfortunately seems to just make it angrier and punt Master Bongle further into the forest. To resist the punting, he squirms around onto the back of the beast, which also unfortunately makes it angrier and gives it an advantage, given the thing can fly. It seems content on shaking Beryl off, but only manages to once it lands. They begin an intense match of the floor is lava, and much to the dissatisfaction of the plebs, gravity takes its due. Beryl notices that there isn't much he can accomplish here, other than finding a weak point, so sprints across the molten earth to tickle that pickle, who reacts by burping up some flames. The shockwave of one of the blasts sends Baster skyward, and whether by chance or on purpose, he lands directly into the zebra's exposed eyeball. It hates it when things stab its favorite eyeball, breaking off the embedded blade. Then we get a calculated upskirt on Lysandra as she descends from a cliff directly onto that hope. Job's done. Pasta Party and the scrubs are fine, and the student and master reminisce on old times for a moment. Back at the guild, Nidus is caught up on the insane encounter and is so impressed with the result that he tries to recruit Beryl, failing of course. After concluding things at the guild, Surena apologizes for lugging Beryl along with her, but to be fair, if he wasn't present, things might have been way more sketchy. The praise Bongo gets unnerves him a little bit, but he deflects by complimenting Linus on her decisiveness and decision-making during battle, and they share a special moment together in their memories before existing in awkward silence for an indeterminate amount of time. After all these establishing shots finish, Karuni and Allucia are showing Bertle the way to the blacksmith to fill the void in his belt, when Barbie hears a familiar voice greeting them at the shop. Balder gasps, like the 6th alumni we've seen so far, I think. Surprise. Balder cheeses, and Sensei Beryl remembers that Baldo was uniquely older than everyone else at the dojo, his goal at the time being to learn everything about swords before making them. It's good seeing a student of his succeed, and Balderdash gets to business. Karuni's knife is busted, so she's gonna have to get a new one. This sparks the debate of how her blade feels to wield. She responds with light, and that's just the crux. A short sword is too dainty for her, and she's just gonna keep breaking new ones. So Beryl considers the Zweihander and has her give it a flick. That's an enormous difference in technique, but if she already knows the basics, it's probably a better fit. Anyway, time to peruse the wares himself. The discount section is a pretty good place to start here. Suddenly, Lysandra arrives with a big sack and an attitude. That bird they shot the other day might make for a nice longsword for Beryl, so she brought along its enormous stupid leg. Allucia has qualms rooted from simple jealousy, but xylography was looking to apologize anyway, and anything forged from the Zuntal Gauntlet is bound to be remarkable, so Beryl can't exactly decline now. Plus, Bladder wants to make that sword so bad. Now that things are settled, Karuni has a coy smile and an idea prepared for the evening. Her Zweihander is going to require some instruction to use after all, so Beryl gives her the scoop on the longer long strats, with emphasis on the ricasso. This little idiot right here helps you get leverage differently, for a sneaky switch up mid-battle if you need. The biggest change is to swing more from the hips though, so Crumblini starts practicing late into the night. Beryl has a couple pints and some good food afterwards and celebration of Karuni's appetite for knowledge, then stumbles home, expertly apprehending a thief along the way. A wizardly thief? Strange. She enters a conspicuously dingy room and hands the evildoers their due. Spider from School of Rock shows up, ready to be painted by Leonardo de Capri's son, and introduces his new girl as Miui. She lost her precious ring of power in the scuffle with Beryl, and the ring finds a reluctant new bearer. Back in the training grounds, Hinblitz tries a feint for the first time, still gets easily bested, then reflects on Karuni's eagerness to learn about her new blade. After all, the knights are in a hurry, so having everyone up to snuff and ready for battle is imperative. Some no-good villains known as the Dark Hand of Twilight have been farming the citizens for their gold from the shadows and are in need of hounding. Beryl is thankful that the knights are so keen to get the job done, so he doesn't have to do any fighting himself. We all know that won't happen, but he can dream, I suppose. Beryl suddenly remembers the necklace he scooped up after robbing a child, but once he whips it out, the undergrad's imaginations go nuts and cause several misunderstandings. Anyway, after the intro, he's able to explain the situation to the pair, piquing their interest in this young wizard multiclassing into thievery. Mages are so sought after that even children with magical power are set for life after all. Regardless of the circumstances, Beryl figures he'll turn the ring in as lost property, so it'll hopefully be returned to its proper owner, fetal wizard or not. After handing it in, Bagel is satisfied with a job well done. However, the glare he received from the pickpocket doesn't sit well with him, and he is immediately distracted by the rising cost of housing. Once he decides that drinking money is better than paying more for rent, the hooligan comes pacing along, clearly troubled at not being able to find her bauble. Beryl notices, of course, and is attacked as the most likely culprit. He understandably doesn't want any trouble, though, and negotiates an armistice in a nearby alleyway. The ring wasn't stolen, apparently, so they may as well go pick it up. And despite seeming to genuinely not like Beryl, the thief regrettably tags along. As they walk, Bemple attempts to wrest a name and impart some worldly wisdom upon her, managing only to infer that she's not totally feral. When Beryl retrieved the item, he also retrieved Allucia, who at first believes that Beryl has sired a clandestine love child. Later, over tea, the Knight Commander is given the scoop, and now wonders what her master has in mind for this girl. He doesn't wish to turn her into the police, but she fervently states that she doesn't intend to stop pickpocketing. This is a bold statement to utter in front of the commander of the Royal Knights, but Alimony responds by suggesting that she use her magical ability for the kingdom instead of some dastardly felons. If someone or something is forcing her into a life of crime, then it would be worth the effort to pluck her out of it. As long as she gets her necklace back, she'd do anything at this point, I guess, and caves, stating that if she pays $5 million to the boss man, he'll bring her dead sister back to life. That's rough, bud. Allucia excuses herself, leaving Beryl to awkwardly hang out with the angry child. Strike that, the angry and hungry child. He goes to get her a tasty loaf, and upon returning, explains that he couldn't ignore someone who seemed to be in such distress, especially a pithy street squirt like her. She is completely absorbed in chowing down, so is only half listening. But once Beryl introduces himself, she reluctantly gives her name, Miwi Freya, and gets her stuff back. As Miwi is about to exit, Lucy barges in to recruit a fresh-faced wizard, incinerating the table to display her prowess. Beryl reflects on this. Mule has had it up to here-ish with the police brutality and attempts to decline, restating her desire to resurrect the dead. Lucy candidly responds against this absurd notion, though. Take it from the head of magic herself, Miwi, that ain't right. But Mewtwo remembers the instant she was scammed into believing that BS, and can't be easily convinced otherwise. This is really no laughing matter, though, as her sister's soul has likely been defiled and dishonored by an evil wizard. Lucy would love to turn his crusty forehead into ash, mix that ash with water and clay, throw a nice pot with the base, fire that bad boy up, then smash it with a hammer. Miwi gives it a thought over, then agrees with the sentiment. Lucy continues to say that she'd like to see for herself if the wizard is fake. If he is, she'd happily pay out the $5 million to Miwi. His name is Twilight. The knights are shook, and Lucy recruits the kind-hearted Beryl to escort them to the bandit's lair. The stroll there is filled with conversation of wizards hailing from all walks of life. Then when we arrive, Beryl sends out a BCC that he brought a wooden sword and maybe shouldn't have. That isn't foreboding at all, and Lucy explodes the front door, promptly launching a goon and demanding to see their leader. Benadryl is left with the rabble, of whom most are swiftly and easily dispatched, while Lucy finds Twilight. He's already trashed and not willing to go down without a fight, dropping an iceberg onto Lettuce with his bracelet. It is unsurprisingly ineffective, so he attempts to use gravity magic. That's what fooled Miwi, determines Lucy, and she finishes the battle with the real thing. Meanwhile, Beryl isn't even breaking a sweat downstairs, having felled at least 6 dudes. Twilight is then dragged up to Miwi and forced to say that resurrection magic doesn't exist. A depressing reality, but necessity. Beryl and her have a sad wander downstairs to where Miwi's sister should have been, but find nothing. All that's left of her is that necklace. Now, as for what's next, Miwi doesn't know, but Beryl is sure it can only get better from here. Mowgli has an existential crisis, though, having spent her whole life being used and abused by people who she thought cared for her and her sister. Very jovially responds by stating that some adults are just like that. His lax attitude somehow soothes Miwi's troubled mind a little bit, and later, the knights show up to arrest the perps. Lucy nabs Miwi and heads home, while this suspiciously robed fella watches from the shadows, only to explode the ringleader while no one was looking. There's a cabal of suspicious corpse collecting going on under the church, I think, and the Pope is the main culprit. Lucia catches Beryl after training to say that Twilight ate a magical bomb and violently exploded before he made it to jail, so they'll never find out from him where the missing bodies went off to. Finkel also had too much drip to be a self-made man, so someone was definitely funding his grave robbing. Anyway, Beryl acquires his Giga Zingor leg blade and excitedly heads back to the training grounds to test it out. However, Lucky is found awaiting his return and brings him to her place. This is Ebroy Howlman, a priest of the Church of Sphene. His presence confuses Beryl, but after Lucy elucidates that Twilight was getting artifacts in exchange for bodies, Igor states that the bishop was trying to conduct a miracle of Sphene, the most advanced of miracles actually, the resurrection of the dead. Shook. It's just a legend, but some people really believe it, the Bishop Revios included. Tomorrow, the Night Order will demand Revios turn himself in for his misdeeds, but he will probably just run off. So when that happens, they want Beryl to snatch him before an international incident occurs. Everything for the mission has already been prepared, so all that Bearballs needs to do is say yes and probably kill people. He reflects on a couple of good reasons to pursue this freak, then figures he'll accept if it means he can help Miwi move forward. Upon leaving, speak of the devil, it's Miwi, who is out shopping. She has another existential crisis after being treated with kindness, asking why they are the way they are. For one thing, Beryl just likes helping out, and I think Lucy is especially sensitive to stuff related to magic, so Miwi ended up at the right place at the right time, I'd say. Beryl reminds her that kids shouldn't worry about that sort of stuff, and that she should try to relax now that she isn't fighting for survival. It's true, and she should, but Menards is rather traumatized, so I suspect it will take a spell for her to settle in. Having Burple around should help though, and he Genki Dine's Drake gracefully out of the building. Later, as expected, the bishop is about to move to Venezuela, so Beryl approaches to intervene, running into the hooded fella that exploded Twilight. He sicks some magically enhanced zealots on Beryl and runs off to play Bongo Cat. After resolving himself to be engaged in a death match, Benny makes the first move, deftly cutting an entire guy in half. That new Zumpleated ginger-based longsword is pretty sharp. 3 more roided meatbags flank from the rear, but thankfully, Ficelle and Crunchy were supposedly passing by and make for excellent backup. Suddenly, the baboons all share a collective stroke after their spells wear out, buying Beryl time to run ahead while the other 2 hold up any pursuers. I guess this guy's name is Spur. The bishop begins to frantically pray to his god, activating Pinay's miracle and returning the dead to life. Kind of. Beryl is disturbed and begins to remorsefully dispatch the undead, delaying the sister's execution for last. Once only she is left, Beryl apologizes, then turns Miui's sister into glitter that drifts into the effulgent moonlight. He sheds a single tear onto the sister's matching ring, but this is no time for melancholy, and Spur attacks, striking Beryl in the arm before he even had time to analyze the situation. This guy is cracked, but anyone who messes with life so guilelessly shouldn't be spared, and Bingo launches himself forth to the success of a well-landed counter. This enrages Spurt, who injects himself with an experimental type of Indonesian desomorphine that causes his nutsack to irreversibly shrink to the size of a lentil and agility to increase by 10-fold. Beryl finds himself overwhelmed with the spastic freak show, but reaffirms his determination, baits that idiot with an Albert stance, Nach raisins up with a clean Zwerschhau, and finishes with a regular old slice to the chest after Spur decides not to defend. Despite sustaining heavy muscle damage, Spur is more meth than man and lunges forward in a final last-ditch effort, only making his struggle look more horrifyingly gruesome as he states his determination to die in order to create a miracle of God. Beryl asks the dying man why he'd go so far, to which he replies that Beryl wouldn't understand. He figures that Spur is probably right with that assessment, then meets up with the homies, who have already hogtied the bishop. He taunts Beryl by making light of Spur's life and those of the bodies he stole, then brings up Sfindire Vanya, the origin place of their religion. It's doomed to destruction unless the church gains strength. Beryl and I don't know what to make of this information just yet. Later, Apache Lucine thanks him for his hard work while he sulks about having little success helping Miui out by fighting with the Pope. Lucy notices, then tries to cheer him up by showing Beryl his brand new 2,000 square foot home, complete with a juvenile wizard that has decided to enroll at Hogwarts. Miui needs her guardian's signature, but instead asks whether this room could be hers. Beryl just smiles though, and that's the end of part 1 of the Old Country Bumpkin. Hey, thanks for watching this. If you enjoyed the past few minutes, get help. Also subscribe and like the video and stuff. If you have money left over from your sock budget, I wouldn't mind receiving a couple of dollars over on my Patreon. Okay, that's all the grifting I have for now. Thanks again.